Massimo de Angelis, who is a professor in political economy at the University of Boston, editor of the online journal The Commoner, one of the pioneers in critical studies of the commons, and he's editor of the In Common book series at Set Books, and his last book is Commons and the Transformation to Omnia Sum Communia, Commons and the Transformation to Post-Capitalism. Thank you, Massimo.
Thank you. I'm going to have a PowerPoint slightly just a few months older, just because there is some picture I want you to see. I'm going to talk in my 10-15 minutes, hoping that I don't fall again in the crack. Is about well, I'm not really sure how to call it. Maybe my last preferred name is agroecological commons. But you know, there has been a huge literature on urban commons, and a lot of also a very large literature on agricultural commons, peasant struggles in the global south. But in the commons literature, there is not much reflections about the attempt in, for example, in Europe or countries in Europe, for to build commons that subvert the current practices of agricultural practices, and create a possibility for most people to have very good food, good quality food at a good price. I mean, low price, accessible prices. I mean, if you review the literature on climate change, you will see that there are many statistics, but without transportation, agribusiness, global agribusiness has an impact of about 80 to 20% on climate change, on greenhouse gases. And if you include transportation, that goes up to 30-35%. We know all the facts, I'm not going to bore you about reviewing this, all the facts of agribusiness in terms of health and ecological destruction. On the other hand, you have a legal way to deal with this through the organic movement, okay, organic labeling, which requires certifications. But certifications is very costly for producers, especially small producers, and is riddled with fraud. Only in the last few years, there have been several cases being reported of actually large organic producers paying the agency, the private agency that was supposed to certify the organic nature of your productions, who actually being paid off to actually do the certifications. A movement, the movement I've been studying and been actually working with is called Campi Aperti, and it's in Bologna, and it's part of a national network in Italy called Genuino Clandestino. And I think what they're doing is incredibly innovative, because they break this impasse in between horrible agricultural practices and state-led organic certification. And what I have here one of their mascot here, the pig with the pirate banner, and I just want to read this. Where is the thing? The mouse here? Where is here? See everything. Where is it? How do you move forward here? See everything. Oh, here it is. Yeah, how does it The other statistic I'm not going to bore you about. So the case of Campiaperti, it's an organic, it's an association of producers and consumers. The producers, just to make the case around Bologna, it's 130 producers around Bologna in various areas. So you see, it's a quite large areas covered, but they're concentrated in 7 markets in Bologna. And the amazing things about this is that the producers and consumers meet in assemblies, which each market has an assembly, where they decide all that is to be decided regarding the quality of productions and the prices of the different food items. And each market has its own assembly between producers and consumers, and all the markets meet in a general assembly to deal with broader issues like dealing with the councils, which is actually very ambiguous. On one hand, it is a confrontational relationship. At times they go on strike and they do direct actions on the squares in front of the council that occupy with their own market as a sit-in. And other time is instead negotiating positions which with the aim of obtaining authorizations to actually get the different sites. It's very interesting. These ongoing different modes of the relations, because they constitute these relations both in confrontational way and then also in negotiating way on an ongoing level. Now, if you think about what I just said about the prices, you think, well, what's the point? But if you think about how the basic categories of the economy works, if you ever open up a 101 introductory textbook of economics, you'll find out that the price is either made by, either you take the price because it's you as a producer, you take the price because you are in a perfect competitive market, or you make the price because you are a monopolist. Well, here the price and all the other aspects of the production is co-produced between producers and consumers. In other words, what in a standard economic environment, economic practice, supply and demand are antagonistic. Here, supply and demand are brought on the same table, and they're part of the same cooperative movement. And that is, to me, absolutely crucial. Another crucial issue here is the level of trust. How do you trust that this stuff that they produce is good? I mean, the variety of stuff which is produced is quite large, ranging from vegetables to processed food, processed in kitchens, in laboratory, fantastic organic beer and all that thing. How do you guarantee that there is, in fact, quality in the food? How do you guarantee, how can you get the trust that what you buy is good stuff? And the interesting thing is the trust which is developed through, again, a collective commons mechanism. That is what we call, we who deal with this kind of systems, commoning, the doing in commons. And in this case, the doing in commons is made by consumers and producers. Well, how you manage trust? Well, you manage through a process in which you don't rely on an external agent which is corruptible, telling you who to trust with a particular certification. But you do it by an internal process of visiting and getting to know the different producers. That is the kind of certification which is participatory certification. There is a participatory certification between producers and consumers. Essentially, just to cut a very long story short, I mean, this is a long process. Trust is gained through a process which is not necessarily short. So what is actually happened is that new producers want to join the system, and a group of producers and consumers go to visit the premise, and that premise is visited, and they're discussing in a communal way what can be done to actually raise the standard in a very simple way, and then the producer is welcomed in the collective, and the control of the monitoring of that producers, or of every producer, is an ongoing process through the participation of the commons. Now, if you look at the commons theory, Elinor Ostrom, who's the super guru of the Nobel Prize laureate of the commons theory, put one of the design principles of the commons is precisely the monitoring and control. But here the monitoring and control is done collectively through a process that replicates very closely what goes on in the village economy. And it's interesting because here we're talking about an area of Bologna. I mean, these are markets situated in a modern urban city who are actually reclaiming all processes of trust building which belong to a village culture, but they translate it into a new modern context. In other words, we see you all the time, we visit you, we know one another. Oh, what are you doing with these strawberries? Where you got these strawberries? You don't produce strawberries. No, we are not accepting your friend's strawberries. Where did this come from? Are you trying to cheat the system? No, it's an ongoing process of trust building. And another very interesting thing is the price. Let's go back to the price which is made. Now, the price that you find these wonderful produce. I mean, we're talking about really succulent stuff when you cook it and use it. I mean, it's really good stuff. You don't find this stuff in any supermarket or in any organic shops. The other interesting thing here is that the price is just above supermarket prices. I'm talking about 10, 20 cents. I mean, very little, depending on the kind of product, but very just about above the supermarket prices, and then you find it very far lower than any organic shop. So we're talking about here a system which develop a certain complexity of management that is involved in negotiation with the state and in a national network of similar systems, each with its own specificities. Campi Aperti is just one of the many networks, many groups throughout Italy called Genuino Clandestino. I don't know how many people have heard about it. It's there are different varieties of the way things are organized within Genuino Clandestino. I only want to talk about Campi Aperti. That's the kind of brand you get when you do participatory guarantee system. I don't want to complexify things, so I think I've actually finished. This is just a schema of how the different, how the assembly of producers and consumers and the different nested assemblies, actually, not just one assembly, there is the assembly of the market, the assembly of the entire organization, actually deal with all the other things, including movement stuff like campaigns, most recent campaigns, solidarity work with migrant communities. So it's a vast array of things. And I find it wonderful because I'm an economist by training, and when I encounter this system, I was really taken by the incredible simple way in our urban context to subvert economic categories by practicing completely different values, by defining norms, by experimenting. If you go into the assembly, there is a learning curve. In the last few months, for example, they've been seeking training, the entire assembly, in how to do better consensual methods. In Italy, consensual methods are quite alien. They come, more from Latin America and the indigenous tradition there, and a bit more North America at the time of the anti-globalization methods. And in Italy, I felt this kind of filtering in, the will methods, which use the hands and all the things. They are learning. You see all these farmers wanting to learn this technique, seeking the knowledge that exists in the territories to learn to do this consensually, and an amazing way to protect low income. And of course, the last thing about this is what is the motivation of these farmers? The motivation of these farmers is, first of all, if you trace the history, which I'm not able to do this in 15 minutes, but if you trace the history, much of the motivation of these farmers is essentially that the alternative was to sell their produce to the large distributions. And by selling their product to the large distribution, they would fetch an incredibly low price, which would force them to increase in size and industrialize, and therefore playing the cap game and trying to get subsidies and buy more bigger tractors and using fertilizer, etc. That is one of the reasons that I felt there is very much the lack of alternatives, so they've created the alternative, their own alternatives. But the other motivation is, of course, that many of these farmers want a different kind of life. They see what is rotten in the agri-industrial systems, and together with the consumers, that build, which actually they call co-producers, incidentally. They're not co-consumers, but just so as we understand each other. So together with the co-producers, they are building these alternatives. So I'm just this. I wanted just to bring here this testimony about this model. I'm not familiar with anything exactly like this in Europe. I know that there are many other systems, box schemes and agricultural support networks and all that. But like this, with assembly and complete involvement of the two sides of the demand and supply, and therefore subverting this and bypassing this dichotomy, I think this is quite unique. So if anybody knows any other similar example, please tell me, because I'm really curious about it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One round of comment of questions. Yes.
Good afternoon, Massimo. My name is Ana Margarida Esteves. I've actually been reading a lot of your work, and I have a comment regarding making these kind of commoning schemes, or the produce of these commoning schemes, available to people with lower income. I've read several empirical studies of social solidarity economy networks, especially in Italy, I can't recall the name of the author, but her surname starts with a G. She published in the Journal of Political Ecology, but she claims that in order for many of, that in her study of farmers who joined these alternative networks, she found out that actually those who managed to join these networks, those who had the privilege of turning their revolt against what is rotten in the mainstream system into something actually constructive, like joining one of these networks, what made it possible was actually a certain degree of privilege that they already had in the mainstream economy, a kind of safety net. For example, many of those people came from a middle-class background, or they had properties which they could rent out in order to make an alternative income, which could cover their expenses as they transitioned from the cap-like agriculture into an alternative form of agriculture, which is more labor-intensive, which has like maybe lower return to units of value as the cap-like agriculture, and that there were many farmers, who tried to join like community-supported agriculture systems or solidarity economy networks, who didn't manage to make it through the transition period because they lacked that kind of safety net. And so I would like to know if you found similar evidence in your study, and actually if there's a kind of homogeneity or a kind of, unseen or unconscious self-selecting mechanism. And actually, if we can think that in the current stage of the commons movement, if being able to transition from capitalist patriarchal mainstream society into alternative livelihoods, if it's something that is only reachable for people who already have a certain degree of comfort, or enough comfort, or a support system that is solid enough within the mainstream economy and society in order for that transition to be successful. Thank you.
We take one more question. Giuseppe, you have the question?
Okay, see. I also come from Italy, and I know how Genuino Clandestino is an important experience, so thank you very much for this lecture. A question is on another design principle of Oscar. So the problem of penalties and of progressive penalties. When I'm studying urban commons, at the end, I think that probably this is one of the issues that is more weak, because when we imagine a democratic governance system, it's really difficult for an assembly to imagine penalties or expulsion systems, so it's a real problem. But also, this is important, because if we speak about a legal framework, a new institution, probably I read too much Hans Kelsen, but you cannot have a legal framework without penalties. It's important because when you speak about penalties, you engage power issues if you use penalties or if you do not use penalties. And because this addresses the theme of trust, the theme of the issue of the consensus process, so penalties is real a problem. So my question is, how you manage this problem in academia?
All right. Now, degree of privilege question. For what I've seen, there is a really large variety, so it's a non-homogeneous, the type of variety of farmers involved. I mean, just to give you an example, I know a couple on 1 hectare of land, 1.5 hectare of land, which has been purchased from saving from the family in an area where the land is very cheap. Surviving, couple with 2 children, surviving and making Campi Aperti and seen Campi Aperti as the really only solution for them. There is also a case on the other extreme of, for example, just to give you the range, of a shepherd from Sardinia whose dad came to Bologna areas with 200 sheep on a boat and then on a train. That's in 1968, and he inherited that with many hectares of land, who's actually working with the sheep and producing cheese, so it's far larger, okay? And I think this range is really consistent. There is a range of activity, but there is these shared values. Now, in terms of whether people have made it, I'm not aware of that. I'm aware that there is the attempt within Campi Aperti to build what is called mutuo soccorso, solidarity between those who can, that is the commons as a whole, and those who have lost, for example, greenhouses or crop due to weather or whatever thing. So there is the attempt to build, right now there is a discussion, to build infrastructure to deal with this cooperatively among this. I know of cases not directly linked to Campi Aperti but to the St. Giulino Clandestino in Parma, which is a closer city, which yes, is struggling. People who actually have to have a wage while like a precarious job, while at the same time doing farming work. Okay, that's actually quite common. A case which actually made me almost cry for how sweet it was of this man presenting itself on the market with few bottles of wonderful apple juice that he went to get to Trentino in the north, where it's producing apples, and that area is completely contaminated. They produce apples for export, it's completely contaminated, but what little areas right in the north where nobody is actually collecting apples, were antique trees, where he went from Tuscany to Trentino to collect the apples from those trees, those antique trees that nobody was picking, coming back and making a juice and selling it to the market. And he tells me, I do this every year since the last 20 years, and I've lost 2 jobs to do that, right? Like there is also a strong passion, a strong sense of wanting to reconnect to land and to the social relations that are involved by producing something very good, okay? So there is individual different stories. I don't think we can generalize on this. People are struggling about it. But I don't think this is a substitution. I mean, of course you have to reproduce yourself, and I mean, the case of Campi Aperti is a case of what I call reproduction commons. That is those commons that deal with issues of reproductions of life, of your life, and food is part of that, and reduces your dependency to the big market, the global market, the capitalist market. But at the same time, you do that, you also engage with other in battles. You also engage yourself in campaigns, like, for example, the campaigns of the use of state land for those young energies who actually want to go forward to the land. And there is also talk about the campaign for giving startup, let's use this bad word so we understand ourselves, startup capital for small farmers to begin, for those who don't have precisely either farmers, families, or don't have means. So there is a variety of things going on. I don't think it's such a black and white thing. On the penalties, for what I understand in Campi Aperti, the penalties are part of a social process. They're not written like in a rule book. For what I understood, in those cases in which something went wrong, that a farmer who is part of the association brings stuff that he's not supposed to do because it's not accountable to certain goods. And if you are recognized for producing eggs, you don't bring I don't know, wheat. Where did you take that wheat? You haven't told anybody you are producing wheat, how you produce it. So there's all issues of quality. Those cases that I've heard, that they told me about, are cases in which those people involved have been told, the neighbors in the markets have raised the issue, first informally. They've been discouraged to do that again until they actually could be certified of those issues, until I heard a couple of people have to leave the market. But again, it's an informal thing. That's what I heard. Now, it's interesting though, because if we compare this in Bologna, wonderful global north city, to what went in a water association, for example, in Cochabamba, I asked the same question that you asked me. What do you do if something doesn't do what it's supposed to do, what he promised to do, right? In the case of a water association, where in Cochabamba, where the different neighbors were paying a small fees and labor to actually produce water for the neighbors. I finished one second. In that case, I said the question, and the answer was, well, we tell them informally. Okay, you're trying to. We'll tell them, then we'll might be increasing their fees, or then we might kick them out. In other words, in a lot of these commons, there is no rule book. There is a social practice that implement Austrian principle. The Austrian principle works, but not necessarily in a rule book. If you have an association that works within certain procedures, it might be that the law or the internal law is not necessary, and social relations find their own way in any way to deal with the issue.
Thank you, Massimo.